Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe.
Yeah, I've been living out in Wyoming for about 7 years and got into, hiking, fishing, not so much, but more hunting and things like that. And yeah, just one of these things where you do a lot of exploring and stuff, and then you try and figure out what you're going to use or keep with you to feel better and more prepared. And then it just kind of took off, and I thought, gosh, man, it'd be really nice if someone else didn't have to go through so much research to figure out the basics.
You're biting the bullet for all of us, so to speak, aren't you?
Yeah, hey, I'm happy to do it. It's how it goes in the world.
That's much appreciated. So right now you're in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. You said you've been there for several years, enjoying the outdoors, like all of us here in the Rocky Mountains. You get out in the woods, and all of a sudden, there's a scenario that you're like, oh man, this could be a real deal. I should have prepared for this. But how on earth would you prepare for running into a natural wild predator that hardly anyone even gets to see, let alone has a problem with in the wild, right? I mean, the odds are pretty slim,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so in the book, it's funny. I had a friend who I was talking to when I was writing it, and I was talking about the chances. Like if you don't ever go in the ocean, then the statistic for getting bitten by a shark is non-existent.
Yeah.
Whereas if you spend time in bear country, it's kind of the same things. For the 1% chance, the person that it's happening to, it's 100% chance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the crazy part about it, is how many thousands of run-ins are there across any given state per year, or maybe even several per day across the nation. I mean, it's not even, I don't even know what the number would be. It's such a small number that any of them would end up in any attack, let alone a fatal attack, right?
Definitely. Yeah, and I mean, so many encounters just don't even get talked about or reported or whatnot because nothing happened, which is great.
Yeah.
But there are, there's a lot more encounters than there are the recorded attacks, especially like fatal attacks, which are the only ones that I feel like people really hear about on news channels and things like that.
Oh yeah, we only hear about the really bad ones, and we don't hear about the who knows, untold number of run-ins and incidences and camp ratings or trash ratings that bears do, that they're more of a nuisance than anything else. And life goes on. We just go, oh, that was a bear. He came by, he ate my trash, chased my dog, scared my cat. It's just,
yeah. I mean, totally. It's funny living out here. There's a lot of really kind of nice ranch homes all over the place in the Jackson area, and people have them swim through their ponds, like 399, which is a pretty famous bear around here. And her 4 cubs that she had previous years were just like hanging out, swimming in their pond. And like they took a video of it, because it was funny because they're up on the second story. But, you can imagine if those weren't necessarily the most, like those particular bears are pretty exposed to people. So they're not necessarily, or they weren't necessarily at that time like aggressive or anything. I think 399 is a pretty intelligent bear. But you could imagine if it was a different scenario, you live in Idaho, Montana, Alaska, wherever, Wyoming, and, that might be in your backyard.
Oh, yeah, undoubtedly. Well, and so the bear number 399, she was a grizzly bear? She was a black bear?
She's a grizzly bear. So I believe she's around, she's in her upper 20s. And she is kind of like an ambassador of Yellowstone, greater Yellowstone ecosystem bears. Is what they call her, at least. She's been the most photographed grizzly bear. Always produces interesting cubs. Like this last year was 4 or 2, maybe 3 years ago, because last year they were yearlings. She produced 4 and you're talking about 5 grizzly bears walking around in one little squad. It's really interesting. Me and my wife actually ran into him. We were up at in Grand Teton National Park in pretty much about a year ago. March, the snow had melted off the road, but there was still snow everywhere else. We could walk down the road, and we're looking, and my wife was asking me, like, hey, how often do you think the animals are using these roads when they're closed to vehicles? And I was like, probably all the time. Animals are lazy, kind of like us,
Right.
And then right as I said that, I said, look up there, about, maybe 150, 200 yards away, we saw, 5 shapes walking across the road.
Wow.
And I looked, and I have a little rangefinder because I like to play a game of guessing the distance to things.
Sure.
So I was like, those are kind of small to be elk. They're too small to be bison. Like, what are those? And I pulled up my rangefinder, and sure enough, I was like, oh, there's $3.99 in the 4 cubs. And they were yearlings at that point. So, I mean, they're all pretty much her size. So, we turn around, give them plenty of space, and, enjoy the rest of our hike.
Yeah, and apparently she's a pretty successful bear, because for an older sow to raise 4 cubs, she's got her food ways to acquire food down pretty well. Apparently not disrupting civilization or people or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, that can be a potentially controversial thing around here, because like her cubs have been known to occasionally like have run-ins and stuff. Last year, like I don't know if it was her or one of the cubs, but there was a horse rider up in the hills here, and kind of ran into them, and the bears actually were like chasing the horse. I don't know, how intense the situation was. There was a video floating around online of it, but the person on the horse is like laughing and probably, I don't know, either laughing from fear or like knows this area, knows those bears or what. But in that zone, I mean, it's not uncommon. I have a friend with a camera that he sets up near his property. He lives kind of on the fringe there and of the woods, and he can every year he'll see between 6 and 8 grizzlies, different individual grizzlies in that zone. So they're definitely around.
That's pretty and precautionary steps are well in order. So your book is titled Handgun Selection for Grizzly Bear Defense, but I think that it probably applies to just about any bear after reading it over, because it's very succinct though. It's only about 70 pages. I was pretty impressed, because I'm like, that's a lot of info packed in there.
Yeah, I always joke that it's kind of more of a field manual than an actual book.
Yeah, that's a good description, I think.
And my boss, so I work for the Jackson Hole shooting experience, and my boss, when he kind of helped me get the motivation to finish this out and write it. And I was looking at titles and stuff, and he was like, you got to have something that really bites, like SEO and things like that.
Right.
So grizzly bear had to be in the title, but this would apply to, mountain lions, black bears, moose, any large mammals that might be potentially aggressive or violent in the wild.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, even with rabid animals, a coyote could be dangerous with rabies. A fox may even be,
Yeah, definitely.
And it may not be under the auspices of an aggressive territorial or defending cubs kind of a thing. It may just be a diseased animal. So, no, that's useful info. So, what led you to, did you have any run-ins that kind of thought, man, people need to know this, or was it just something you see in the news reports around our area, a lot of bear attacks? And I wouldn't say a lot, but they're around and they do.
Yeah, you see them every year.
Right. Oh yeah. Between Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, there's probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 every year, I bet.
Yeah, definitely. I think the year was, I don't know if it was last year or the year before last, was a little heavier. I think there were 7 by, it was like July or something. And that was so I think it was 2 years ago, because it was the year that the lady who was bicycling stopped in Montana behind the post office there, and that whole thing, which you did an awesome synopsis on that on your channel.
Thank you. That was an interesting one, wasn't it? It went right into town. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. It's just like you don't think it's going to happen until it happens. And that's kind of where I started all this. I didn't have any crazy run-ins or anything like that. We've had occasional, I wouldn't say I've had any extreme conflict encounters, but I've definitely, been hunting out for elk out here. And as you're going through thick timber, there's a lot of times where, you just kind of are trying to make some noise, but trying not to make noise, trying to sound like an elk. So, it is a consciousness thing of what do you do right? Do you, how do you play the wind game so that your prey is not smelling you, but you're also not sneaking up on a bear and getting into their personal bubble where, those kind of surprise attacks are really common. Those happen.
You just said 2 things that are part and parcel to the whole deal. You said you've got to make noise like an elk. Well, bears eat elk, right? And then you said you got to play the wind game. So if you're playing the wind game with elk, you might be playing it with a bear as well, unwittingly. So it is a gamble. It's a crapshoot. You could just walk right up on a bear, like the Anders Brost episode. The guy was just walking through the forest, and all of a sudden there was a bear laying down in the bottom of the gully.
Absolutely.
Probably had no wind currents just was sleeping and he practically stepped on it.
Totally. But I'd say the main reason, so my dad was a hunter, a handgun hunter a lot of the time. So I remember this story, and I've still got the picture. He was hunting wild hogs in Northern California. And this huge sow hog, 525 pounds, charges at him out of the brush and kind of down this forest road. So he, had a 44 Magnum single action revolver that he was hunting with. And he took one shot, hit the shoulder, and it bounced. Second shot hit the spine and stopped it. Third shot he put behind the ear to drop it quickly. So it was kind of like, it wasn't something where he had the plot on it. It was kind of more of a charging defensive encounter. Yeah. It just so happened to be that he was armed and hunting actively. So the takeaways I got from that was, one, the shot that glanced off the shoulder is that he always said I was using the wrong ammunition because he had soft point hunting ammo. And for a really thick bone on a 525-pound mammal, that type of glancing shot, you're not going to get a crushing effect from something soft like lead where you would something hard like a solid copper or like a hard cast lead alloy, which would not deform and therefore be able to kind of break bone instead of glancing off. So that was one thing that always stuck with me, and that was actually the first gun. He had given me that gun when I came out here, or kind of before that, but that was my go-to thing. And I would carry bear spray and carry that revolver, and that got me thinking, like, okay, ammo type. He always said the ammunition was wrong. What am I supposed to find? So I've always been a firearm enthusiast, just mainly for the recreational sides, shooting sports and things like that. But looking in, doing my research on websites like Buffalo Boar and other places where people have, had encounters with bears, like what ammo did they use that worked, what didn't work, and that's where I found out, kind of the science behind terminal ballistics for hard cast or, other harder solid metals for projectiles.
Now that's great info, and I want to make sure to mention too to anybody that gets to listen to our interview. Hopefully, there's going to be some people that listen to it. You can purchase what he called his field manual. It's again titled "Handgun Selection for Grizzly Bear Defense." Author is Anthony Molina. We're going to put a link. Is it on Amazon, Anthony? You're going to give me your Amazon link? Okay.
Definitely. Yeah, I'll have you put an Amazon link down there. Absolutely.
Perfect. So if you want to get the whole book, you can do it at the bottom of the video here. He's got about 14 chapters. I have the book in front of me here, so I'm sorry if it makes a bunch of noise as I flip through it. So in chapter 1, you said you commented on something that's pretty important. You said preparing the mind. That's the title of the chapter. What do you, after your research, what do you think is the best way to prepare your mind for an incident you may never actually have, hopefully?
Yeah, it's kind of like the first aid world of things, as I've done some first aid training. The key things are, do you have any sort of plan? That is kind of how we get caught with our pants down, is we get this freeze where we're trying, they call it like an OODA loop, where you're trying to observe and figure out, oh my gosh, what's happening? And then once you can kind of orient yourself in that moment, you're like, okay, this is what's happening. Now I have to decide what to do. And then, you have to act on that decision. So a lot of people don't even get past the observe, we kind of just get stuck. And I've seen it with tourists in the park, running into grizzly bears out here and in like the Yellowstone Teton area. So I would say, the important thing is to think, like, is this something you're going to be capable of? Can you be disciplined to carry a defensive means like bear spray? Are you willing to learn how it works? Or are you going to throw it in the bottom of your backpack? Are you, willing to take on the responsibility? There's always responsibility that comes into play, whether we choose or not to accept it. That's a whole nother thing. So really the breakdown I was trying to do in that chapter is just help people realize, like, you're going to take on this responsibility. And if you don't act, okay, you're where you were before taking on the responsibility, no big deal. But if you do act, what are the smarter ways to act if you're going to go into any type of situation where there might be this eventful encounter, and what can really keep you safe. So the mental part of it is how to use any equipment that you might be bringing and how to, accept the responsibility for that sort of thing. The other thing is just the knowledge of where you're going. I mean, I've seen countless people on the ski hills out here or hiking through the parks out here that aren't aware of the hidden dangers, and maybe avalanches for skiing and things like that, for bears and stuff like that, making noise. There's all those kind of signs they put up in the parks as you enter bear country where they tell you, make noise, try to, walk with the wind at your back so it's carrying your scent toward your destination. And then just animal behavior. I used to train dogs for a while in Northern California, so I do have a lot of experience dealing with animals and body language, and like nonverbal communication. So that was always a tool that I was really thankful to have whenever I'd run into any types of animals, like you mentioned earlier, like coyotes and things like that. Really, any animal you run into, human or otherwise, is going to act in very similar ways for different types of behavior. So if you can read those things and educate yourself, you'll probably stand a better chance at avoiding issues before they actually become violent or aggressive or anything like that.
Oh, absolutely. And preparing your mind, just like in that chapter, I don't know. I mean, the law of averages is going to catch up with everyone, I suppose. But here in Idaho, I've been an avid bow hunter and fisherman and just hiker and just love being in the woods like so many other people. And I've never had a problem with anything, right? I've had cougars follow me a few times in the winter, and wolves have been around me and stuff like that. But nothing has ever presented an aggressive approach to me. So preparing your mind for the fact that it could be a possibility, and that it requires action, not just screaming. Like a lot of the episodes on our channel, the mountain biker from a couple weeks ago, he was the bear surprised him along a trailer. He surprised the bear. The bear slapped him, knocked him right off his bike, and the guy was on his knees screaming. When the bear that maced itself was the episode. And he was but that's the thing, is that they're just so random that a lot of the time, how do you prepare your mind? So I think it's a good thing to talk about. In chapter 2, you said the importance of preparation. Now, that's not mental preparation. That is, you're talking about how being prepared to handle what you have to deal with outside of your mind in terms of your discipline and shooting and stuff like that. Is that right?
So there is just so much awesome media out there, books and all sorts of things talking about, bear behavior, how to, safely maneuver through bear country, how to keep, food safely stored, and different types of camping advice. So I largely just wanted to focus this on a very niche section, which is defensive means, whether that's, firearms or bear spray or whatever else, like the little bear fences people put around camp and things like that. So I touch largely just on the firearms and bear spray, because those are the things that you can carry with you while you're moving that are kind of that instant means of defense, where you're probably getting surprised and caught off guard. So largely I just wanted to focus on what people could do to realize how hard it is to use anything under stress. I think most people don't encounter grave instances of stress in their entire life. So when the time does happen, like the law of averages, every once in a while, maybe they get in a car accident or they get in some type of, encounter. Most people, haven't really prepared for that in terms of, I've seen it with workplaces, how many first aid kits are sitting around and AEDs, and how few people actually know how to use anything in that first aid kit.
Oh, an AED especially. And
nowadays it's great because they talk to you.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, they're all computerized. So the first 2 chapters are really foundational because in the importance of preparation, you're going to talk. You're kind of addressing each of these other chapters. So in chapter 3, you talk about firearms versus bear spray, and of course, a lot of our episodes on the channel have to do with that. So what did your research uncover? Were there statistics involved, or were there just what kind of information did you see when you examined that?
Yeah, so there's like these 2 studies that always get referenced as like this equivocal comparison for bear spray and guns. I would say that, and the author of the particularly like the bear spray study, most people are gonna read those 2 things and realize, okay, these are not equivocal or equivalent studies. There are definitely different metrics being used, different types of means. There's only one lethal means between those two to stop something that is very aggressive. And I always joke when people ask me, like, well, I have bear spray. Is that enough? And I always say, hey, it works awesome a lot of the time, but bears and people, very similar. Different personalities from bear to bear, from person to person. I have a friend who, if you spray him with pepper spray or you punch him in the face, he's probably going to get, really excited because he's a fighter professionally. Yep. And if you spray me with pepper spray or punch me in the face, I'm going to act very differently. I'm probably going to stop whatever behavior it was I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like to just make sure people kind of realize is the rare instances of predatory bear attacks. If you look at those, a lot of those anecdotes and stories, and like as you look at the synopsis of what all happened, a lot of those, either the bear returns to attack again, and the can of bear spray doesn't spray all that long or that far. Right. So, you may deploy your means and then be out of a defensive means. And I believe in redundancy for just about everything. The other thing that is predominant in these stories is, these bears kind of loop around and come back. There was, that episode that you guys did on the kids fishing. And that black bear, that predatory black bear, like that is the type of behavior that, if you successfully spray that bear in the face, like that might be a bear that it stops for a couple minutes or moves around or something, or maybe it doesn't even, does it blow straight through your cloud and get to you without much of that spray getting to the mucous membranes and other parts of the bear's, olfactory senses.
No, that's right. That's right. Well, and also, in the Charles Mock episode and some others, there's a few attacks on our channel that show, they properly dispensed, or whatever you want to say, the bear spray, right? And because of environmental factors, the wind, or maybe the bear was too far when they started, or was too close when they started. Maybe the main part of the stream just missed the bear. It was too low, too high, whatever. And the bear just continued, or maybe the bear was so amped, so angry, so whatever. I don't like to attribute human characteristics to animals too much, but the only thing I can think of is anger, but would just come ripping right through that cloud, so focused on you. So it's a good, like you said in your book, you said that it was a more socially acceptable form of deterrent than, because nobody wants to go out and just shoot a bear and say, well, there you go, you got what you deserved. Because we like to see bears. They're kind of a part of our whole environment, a part of the excitement of it. But,
exactly.
Bear spray has its limitations for sure. I noticed on page 11, you have a pros and cons regarding the discussion of bear spray. The pros has 6 points, 6 bullet points, and the cons, let me flip the page. Yeah, so it's about 10. The cons side of the bear spray argument has 10 good, valid points to it, right? Can you just go over that with us? What did you find were the kind of the drawbacks or the limiters or the nullifications on the use of bear spray to defend yourself?
Yeah, a lot of these. So first off, the pros on the bear spray, they are very significant pros. Their significance and importance shouldn't be understated with just the quantitative value or quantitative value of the other ones. Yeah. However, the cons, there are things that a lot of people don't take into consideration. Cold and freezing temperatures, how that spray actually dispenses out of the can, precipitation, rain or snow, things that are in the environment that can affect how it gets there to its destination, wherever you're spraying it. And then high winds. These winds that, you might feel as you're walking near cliff sides and stuff. There was a bear attack on some hunters out here in Wyoming. I think it was 2 Octobers ago, where this gentlemen are all walking in a line on this ridge side, and about 20 yards to the right is blind view down the ridge, and this bear just jumps right up on top of where they're at, and at that point the time to react is so small, but also just the time to deploy, if that wind is coming up, whether it's morning or night, and how the thermals play. That could just be blowing the spray right toward you and limiting the effective distance of your spray. It becomes seasoning at that point. It doesn't become a deterrent. Yeah, which is a good point that you brought up. If you're trying to spray this through your tent or car or whatever, you're going to have blockages physically, but if your spray blows up in your baggage, which happened to a couple people, or you accidentally deploy it, it has been known to be a latent attractant for bears. Bears get very curious about it because it is a food-like smelling substance, the peppers that they use. Then some, I think it was Geological Services or Forest Services found that out the hard way when it first came out. They thought it was a repellent, so they would spray it on their Jeep tires, and they came back and all the tires were chewed up.
Oh yeah, right. They sprayed on their tires. Oh boy, that was a master plan. Yeah. I don't know why you would think that would work.
Yeah, but that's again, that was when it was kind of a newer thing, and people didn't really have the understanding or the research, and that's the goal of kind of putting this out, is help people see. Like let's say you have respiratory conditions, or you're overweight, and you're in a high altitude environment like Wyoming or something like that. If you're already struggling to get oxygen, and then this spray, which likely is going to get on you at some point, if it gets into your lungs, it can potentially debilitate you. And if you get injured or something, and you have to get out of the backwoods or the backcountry on your own accord, you might put yourself in a serious dilemma where you can't get out on your own power, or your party might not be able to help evacuate you out. Like I grew up with asthma. I don't really deal with asthma attacks or anything like that. But that's one of the things that I thought. I was like, man, like I feel like my lungs are pretty good, but if this stuff gets in there, I don't know if I might have some weird reaction to it or something like that.
Sure.
Now I have sprayed it and practiced with it, and I haven't had any issues, so I feel pretty comfortable carrying it. But someone else might not. So there's a lot of these things that just people ought to know, especially for distance. Spraying that bear spray, it's a pretty short distance. Typically the range is going to be, up to 25 or 35 feet. So if you think of 30 feet is the 10-yard line on a football field. If you're that close and your means is, all right, bears can run up to 40-ish miles an hour depending on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
If they're closing in on you, and let's say they're at a half a gate, at 20 miles an hour, well, stand in the street and watch 10 yards a car coming down a residential neighborhood, that's going to be a short window to get your can spraying. So you want to practice with it and know how that stuff deploys and really what the limits are of it. And then ultimately, like we kind of mentioned earlier, there are these instances where some bears just flat out make it through or ignore the effects of these sprays completely.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, what I really liked about your pros and cons on the bear spray deal is those environmental factors that most people don't think of. Usually when you're hunting, or if you're spring hiking, it's probably going to be cold. It might be rainy. It will probably be at least breezy. So now that thing you think is this 100% reliable deal, it's diminished to possibly 0%, So I think that was
Yeah, I think it's important to know, and that's not. I have a cons section on firearms too. I'm not just saying like, oh, guns are better than bear spray or anything like that. Like any tool or device that we try and come up with, there's always a chance that something just diminishes its value to zero, and it's a paperweight or a bludgeoning tool or something at that point.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So in Chapter 5, you discuss my favorite and preferred method for self-defense, home defense, and big predator defense. I think, to me, a shotgun is the way to go. If you've ever read up on Jim Corbett or any of these other old-time hunters, before guns really became as sophisticated as they are nowadays, they basically used a rifle that was essentially a slug, right? It was a huge gun, I think it was a 450 or 460 Express or something like this. It was bigger than your finger. The bullet was bigger than your finger, bigger round. So, and you mentioned in the book too how to approach shooting at an animal that's coming toward you at a rapid rate with harmful intent like that. And I thought that was really good to add in there. But tell us about shotguns. If you want to just summarize the chapter and what your evidence showed about shotguns being compared to everything else,
it's a reason that it's the first firearm that comes up in the discussion. It's definitely the most I'd say it's one of the more affordable means. It's one of the more simple means, and it's definitely really prominent in government circles, like law enforcement and geological service workers, forest workers, and things like that. So the shotgun, I kind of put it in there first. The synopsis really was, one, just to make sure you know how to operate it and carry it and, you know, safely use it, because, you know, if it ends up hurting you, that's kind of the opposite point of what you meant to carry it for. But the other is that it can house such a tremendous amount of energy with the right types of ammunition. And that was really what I wanted to get across in a lot of this book, is just selection of cartridges. Because most people, like we do at the shooting experience that I work at, we do a lot of these kind of luxury shooting experiences where people who may have never touched a gun come out and they'll spend 3 hours trying all kinds of different guns and things like that. And the foundational knowledge of how a cartridge actually works is lost on, I'd say, 80% of the people that we have in those. You know, like it's just never been a part of their life. They've never even thought about it. So,
and how are they
you know,
supposed to use it, right? If they've never even, you know, they're completely unfamiliar, they're gonna opt for the bear spray and say, well, I don't want a gun, that's dangerous. Well, it is in there.
Yeah, totally.
Probably, right? They probably make
totally. Like buying a guitar does not make you a musician or a guitarist. It's important to practice and get good at and proficient with that. But for the synopsis, really, there's 3 types of commonly used ammunition for out in the wild or whatnot. There's birdshot, which is kind of small pellets that don't carry a lot of energy over distance, designed more for, you know, hunting birds, whether it's grouse or ducks or geese. And there's different sizes of these, but they tend to be relatively small. Then you have buckshot, which is kind of something that's used a lot for defensive means for both like home protection, enforcement, or I guess the original buck from kind of hunting, because buckshot, you could get a higher chance to hit. It shoots a lot of little 30 caliber, so like roughly 0.3 inch BBs at a rapid rate. And those carry energy pretty well out to, you know, I don't know, maybe, I mean, they'd definitely be dangerous out past what I'm saying, but the type of significant energy we're looking for here would be within that 10, 15, 30 yards, that zone there. When you talk about, you know, like bears can range from size and weight and density and all that sort of thing. But really, that buckshot is much better at closer distances. And there's a higher chance where that stuff starts to spread out. So a lot of people prefer that option as a means of just getting shots on target. And it tends to be, you know, if it doesn't hit a vital spot, that could be a really shocking thing for a bear and maybe turn it around or stop it from approaching or something like that, without necessarily ending the bear's life. So sometimes people will use that stuff. And then slugs. Slugs are just one large hunk of lead or some other type of metal projectile that maintains its energy through wind resistance because of the mass that it has. So really, it's going to not only carry a tremendous amount of energy, but maintain that energy through any mediums it might encounter, such as, you know, thick hide, bones, that sort of thing. And that has been kind of one of the main go-tos. Like if you looked at your local Fish and Wildlife in, you know, Wyoming or Idaho or something like that, and if they have to go to an aggressive large mammal call, chances are they're probably having shotguns and slugs.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, that's and in the shotgun chapter, you go through a little bit of that. You also talk about in chapter 6 high-powered rifles, which I think would be, everyone would think that would be kind of the ideal or preferred firearm. I guess, as you listed, second to shotguns, and I would say probably that would be accurate too, because we have episodes on there. The lumberjack guy in Colorado shot the bear through the door with a high-powered rifle. The bear still came in and killed him. I mean, you know, that's it's definitely got its limitations. And as I referred to before too, that in the Corbett books, a lot of the Jim Corbett books, he talks about how animals like tigers or leopards, especially cats, but even bears, are too fast to use a high-powered rifle in dense brush. You can't get them sighted in time. So give us a rundown on the high-powered rifle section. That's chapter 6.
Yeah, so both rifles and shotguns, if you have, you know, an appropriate cartridge with enough energy to penetrate into the either central nervous system or weight-bearing bone that can slow or stop an aggressive charge or something like that. Really, you know, the hard part is getting your shot to place correctly within the time constraints or environmental constraints that are allowed. So, you know, if you're out hunting with a rifle with a scope on it, you know, trying to use a scope to sight something that is fast and close is extremely impractical. I would say, any of the experts in the world that you go and look at, that are going to want to shoot something fast and close, it's not going to have a powerful scope on it. There's other optics and choices that are much more, advantageous. With the type of arms that these would be, like rifles that are pretty large, shotguns that are pretty large, both of them have this issue of accessibility. Those are kind of cumbersome and tough to carry around or have on you at all times. Something that I note on in this book, there's a gentleman up in Alaska who teaches a lot of these incredible, valuable bear defense classes, Steve Nelson, and his kind of motto for any means you're going to be carrying is, if it's not deployable within 3 seconds, it may as well not be on you. If the shotgun's by the door.
I mean, 3 seconds, that's a long time. Yeah, that's no, that's a good rule. At most 3 seconds, I would say you should be able to grab it quickly. That's a great rule.
Yep. Yeah. So, if you're trying to hit something fast, like especially cats, but bears too, I mean, they're incredibly agile and adept in their environment. I mean, you can just watch them scale up trees with just astonishing speed, or run through. There's all kinds of footage online that you can find too. I mean, you talking to the guy who knows all about it, but
yeah,
you can see just how impressive these animals are. So yeah, you want something that typically, if you're going to be encountering a bear in an attack, it's usually going to be in closer quarters, thicker brush, thicker timber, things like that. So you want something that's handy and maneuverable. So a really long-barreled rifle is probably not going to be as great, especially if you think of like the alders and stuff in Alaska, where these people kind of crawl through the berry tunnels and go to these fishing holes and things like that. That's typically shorter barreled shotguns because they're readily available, easy to move around, easy to function. Unless you have some type of like a semi-automatic rifle, where it's easy to use and is a robust design that's relatively fail-proof with an appropriate cartridge. Really, like a high-power rifle is just not as practical. There's lever actions and things like that people can get proficient with at shooting rapidly in close quarters under speed. So something like iron sights or a red dot to help you get on target quickly. But like you said, 3 seconds is a long time. And in the shooting industry, we use shot timers to kind of gauge how quickly and accurately you can deploy any means or get shots or place things like that. And I mean, that thing will tell you 3 seconds is a really long time. So yeah, I like to just hint at the fact that speed is key here. This is not like a hunting scenario where you're getting the drop on on some type of prey that they're there and they don't know you're there, but it's more so of a reactive means where this is defensive. You're not out looking for something has already encountered you, and it's a reactive state that you have to be in. And in that type of situation, hunting rifles and things like that oftentimes aren't set up properly for that type of deployment.
No, that's very true. So in chapter 7, you talk about something that I think most people think, and I know I've made this mistake a lot of times too. I used to pack when I go archery hunting up in the Frank Church Wilderness area in the middle of nowhere, right? And there's probably grizzly bears there. They'd say there isn't any, of course, but I would think there was, just because there's not been people there, right, for quite a while.
Yeah.
And for 50 years, I mean, there hasn't been anyone there's no roads being developed there, that kind of thing. And I packed a 9mm pistol on my side for most of my archery hunting time. And it just kind of occurred to me the last 10 years or so how inadequate that was. I mean, you would at most you'd give them a neck ache. It's not going to slow them down. But in chapter 7, you talk about handguns, and so the key to having a handgun that's adequate. You compare revolvers and semi-autos, and you compare the types of bullets that would be most effective in defending yourself.
Definitely, yeah. So handguns lack what shotguns might have in mass and speed, and what rifles have in just all-out speed and then mass is a factor too for the projectiles they shoot. Handguns typically are slow comparatively and much lower mass. Now there's hand cannons. We talk about these big 454 Casull revolvers and things that are really popular for grizzly bear country. But those things are also really tough to shoot when speed is a factor. So there's always been this debate of, semi-automatic handguns are too weak, but you get a lot of shots, a lot of chances, or, you get a revolver with 5 or 6 shots, but the power is tremendously different, or the mass of that cartridge, that bullet. Really there was this era of ammunition knowledge that just was very sad. People didn't have a large understanding of what ammunition worked for what. You'd see people out in bear country. Well, there was one in the black bear in Arizona. I can't remember the gentleman's name right now, but hollow point ammunition was what was in the gun, and he wasn't expecting to run into a grizzly down there.
Right.
And it ended up not being a grizzly, a black bear, but still the same kind of fundamentals are there. It's a large body. Hollow points are typically designed for, expansion to deliver kinetic energy. So it's going to slow down. If you think of a parachute opening up and deploying itself to like catch whatever medium it hits, in that case, wind or air resistance. Hollow points would be designed to catch whatever mass it encounters. So you think bones or maybe a wall, and it wouldn't go through the wall or something like that as fast. But if you want something with a large body and like a bear, if you want to get to the central nervous system of that, you're going to need something that's going to make it past a lot of thick tissue, thick hide, and thick bone potentially to get into the control center. So, you'll see a lot. There was, I'm having a space on it, but on one of the channels, I don't know if you did that one or not, there's a gentleman who talks about the truth of handguns and grizzly bears, which you'll see a lot of these YouTube videos of like, oh, this is the best thing you need for that or whatever. But I think this bear ended up eating something like 40 handgun rounds before it finally stopped, all different calibers and things like that.
Yeah, that was on my channel. That was the elk hunters up by Wyoming, and they had 2 firearms on this bear from 20 yards. And they shot 31
that's the 31 shot, right?
Yeah, that was crazy. And these were hard cast bullets. These weren't hollow points. Well, one of them was shooting hollow points from what I remember. But the other guy had the right ammo in him, and he had everything. And that bear still got to them, basically got right to them.
Yep, and luckily, they were successful in protecting themselves. The one I'm speaking of was some bear hunters. Anyways, long story short, they had taken a bunch of these shots and all different types of ammunition, different things like that. But it was something like 40 plus shots before the bear actually stopped, and they ended up doing an autopsy and looking at where the things hit and stuff like that. So when it comes to any firearm, just getting a hit on target, there's accuracy, and then there's kind of these preciser places we need to place shots to actually be effective. There's the old joke, there's a guy with a 357 who shot the grizzly, and the grizzly died, but 3 months after the guy did.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly.
So I would just say that the important notes are something that you're actually proficient with. If you can't place shots on target, it doesn't matter how big or monstrous this handgun is. If it's not effective in terms of speed and accuracy and safe handling, then it's just a hindrance, in my opinion. You might be better off running with 2 less pounds on you or something like that, or not running and taking a different approach depending on the type of situation you're in. But the one thing that people often lose out on, since Hollywood is the #1 teacher of firearm fundamentals in the world, or at least in the U.S., is that handguns are extremely difficult to shoot, even with incredible skill. There's still a lot that plays into the alignment of everything. You have to be able to have that skill and get lucky and have everything else pan out perfectly. You might not even get a chance to pull out your gun. There's these attacks that happen in just incredible speed, and humans just aren't all that fast sometimes. So or that aware, for that matter. So I think there's a lot of it. Go ahead.
And it goes back to what you said earlier too about your friend. You might punch him in the face and he'll react a certain way, and then you you get bear spray in the face and you'll probably stop doing what you're not supposed to do or whatever. The bears, that's the kind of thing that people also have that reaction. I've run into bears in Idaho that immediately had like a NASCAR driver 900 miles an hour away from me in a direct line, just like I'm the scariest thing in the earth.
Totally.
But not all bears do that, and not all people will even, unless they practice, like you're talking about, that battle of the mind and being familiar with your stuff, with your equipment. That's all part of that training to get you to react to that anticipated, if it ever happens, kind of a scenario. You might just fall on the ground and start screaming if you don't practice that, at least in your head and with your equipment and that kind of thing. So I think those are all really good points from your book. That's for certain.
Awesome. Yeah, and I try to, because the original reason I wrote this book, we would do these, shooting lessons and things like that, and every single time, because a lot of these people are coming from all over the United States or sometimes the world, every single experience that we would do, they'd say, hey, what's the best gun for grizzly bear defense? And I was like, well, that's a complicated question. We can spend 45 minutes talking about this or longer, or, we can get to shooting and, I can kind of give you a couple of the details. So I wanted to write an article just on revolvers versus semi-automatics. And then that developed into, well, what about single action revolvers versus double action revolvers? Because that was my first gun that I carried out there, was a single action revolver. Then that opened up to the pool to, ammunition types. And you talked about the 9mm Luger, essentially. That's the cartridge name for listeners who aren't particularly savvy for firearm stuff. But
sure.
There was up in Alaska, Phil Schumacher, who is out guiding some fishermen, or a husband and wife, I think it was. And he had a tiny, like a very small concealed carry style handgun, chambered in 9mm. But he had loaded it with some hard cast ammunition, something like, Buffalo Bore, Underwood. They make these really dense projectiles that go a nice speed with enough mass to help penetrate through dense mediums. And they actually, I think he had like 6 or 7 shots in that thing. And this bear came up, kind of showed this aggression, was getting toward where it was about to attack them. And he shot with a 9mm and actually ended up, potentially saving the lives of the people. We don't know how it could have played out. It's just, that's something where people would think no possible way a 9mm would work against a grizzly bear. And, here you saw it. Now different sizes of bears and different circumstances, it could have just as easily went the other way. But it was just interesting to see, what quality correct type of ammunition can do. So I've had people that just frankly can't handle higher recoil than a 9mm proficiently. So at that point, if they were going to carry a firearm or something and they had a 9mm, I would say get an appropriate cartridge, practice the skills you might need to efficiently and proficiently shoot that, but also, clear any malfunctions or things that might arise. It's kind of like that
point.
Yeah, that plan, especially if you think of the analogy or the commonality to first aid, where, like you see a giant pool of blood in front of you and there's this person screaming. Do you have steps you can go through to guide you into the correct way to hopefully, help extend their life? Or do you just have that pause, panic, and freeze where all of a sudden the tools that you might have aren't able to be deployed?
Yeah, screaming and praying at that point are probably two of your least appropriate defenses, right?
I suppose it depends on who you talk to. But yeah, I would prefer an alternative means.
Yeah, right. So chapter 8, we kind of just talked about chapter 8. We just kind of got to the edge of it, actually. But you have a part in there that says shooting during a charge. That's kind of what I alluded to at the beginning, in terms of when you feel, if you have the time, right? This is all time dependent and situation dependent. But if you have the time to prepare, right, to shoot, I thought that chapter was really useful. And it's just the same advice from any hunting book that you've ever read. Anyone that's hunted in Africa or Asia, or probably even in North America or in Alaska, and all the areas where there's a large animal coming your way quickly. Can you just hit on that real quick and just let us know, what you're talking about there and what the proper steps are? Yeah,
definitely. If you're shooting during a charge, if you think of yourself standing presumably 5 to 6 feet, somewhere in that range, plus or minus. As you are looking towards something that might be charging at you, like if your dog is running toward you with a frisbee in its mouth, you'll see that as you look forward toward the animal, it is getting lower and lower and lower as you are looking out. So your angle would shift down to keep up with its distance toward you. A lot of people have preached, if there's something coming at you and it's getting lower, you can do one of two things. You can aim a little bit low. So like if you aimed at the tip of the nose, you might have a chance, if your shot was delayed, let's say, and the animal moved forward, you might hit the spine or something like that if you were delayed with an accurate shot, which could potentially stop an animal like it did for my dad and that boar, or the sow. But if you look at another means, is you can change your angle and kneel, essentially, and now that target is not going to change level as it's coming toward you. You're already on the same level as it. Now, different types of geography and things like that can alter that, but sure. But yeah, that's something that has been definitely widely hit on in a lot of hunting books and things, especially hunting predators that might also try to hunt you at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that central. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think also, I've read of it. I've read of that idea in a lot of African hunting stories where the guides always say, when it's coming at you, get down on its plane of travel. Now, whether it's coming uphill at you, then you're still on its plane of travel. And if it's coming downhill at you, you could still be on its plane of travel if you do that. But when it's coming straight at you on flat ground, that angle that you're losing as it's speeding to you, like you're talking about, is what's going to cause you that vertical displacement of your bullet, your accuracy. So I thought that chapter was really important and I think it even applies really to bear spray. It may even apply to bear spray. If you're spraying bear spray, that may come into effect a little bit. That same angle of disbursement. I don't know. It's just my thought. But
yeah, I mean, if we're talking about very similar things, these are projectiles that we're trying to land in a predicted area. So I'd say that the same factor is there. For firearms specifically, you're trying to hit. If you're trying to stop something immediately, mammal like this, the only thing that's going to completely turn the lights off and stop it from having a chance to get toward you is hitting something like the central nervous system. So that upper spinal cord, brainstem zone, the control center of everything going on. Or, if you have a shot that hits a shoulder or something like that attack that I mentioned, the cliff side, or the ridge side where those hunters were, the hunter that got attacked first pulled his rifle up, didn't have time to get his scope cover off, wouldn't have probably been able to look through the scope very well anyway at that distance.
Right.
The shot connected to the shoulder, which as it leapt forward to try and swing at him, the shoulder actually kind of gave a little bit and it missed its swipe at him. So that is something that actually gave enough time for his party members to effectively get some shots onto this bear that was dangerously close at that point and clearly aggressive. And they actually ended up keeping it from attacking him further, is my understanding. I'll have to reread that one. So yeah, things like that are important. A lot of stuff, especially on, I have this anecdote in my book of when I was a kid, and there was this mean dog in the neighborhood, and I ended up climbing on top of a car to dodge it, until it lost interest and went and did something else. And when I was, 8 years old at that point, like that thing was bigger than me, so it was might as well have been a grizzly bear. But yeah, there are things like trees, boulders, stuff like that you can move and use to put distance between you and another animal. You'll see funny videos on YouTube of deers chasing people around trees that they've climbed up or things like that. And that always really was important for me because I do parkour as well, which is like a way of moving your body around obstacles and things like that. So for me, when I think of the kneeling aspect, part of me wants to get on that same level of plane. The other part wants to still be mobile. So different body types perform differently. I tend to be pretty quick-footed, so I'd like to, if I'm going to kneel, I have an ability to spring up quickly and then dart to a side or something if I need to. And that's something I'll practice over and over. If you are, like let's say you're a heavier set person or your flexibility doesn't allow for that, you might want to think before taking a knee and kind of limiting yourself to that placement. And this is all stuff we can think about, and then when we react, it can be very differently deployed. But yeah, it's nice to have those thoughts beforehand, and then when we act, we hope that the accumulation of our practice and thoughts has put us in a place of advantage.
No, that's a great point in the book, and it was you summarized it very succinctly but very thoroughly. I thought, in chapter 9 you talk about cartridge selection, and that's where you get into kind of the chemistry and the construction, the materials behind what to really use for protection from a bear charge, whether it be black bear, polar bear, whatever. In my opinion, I think that the info in there was very good info, and it kind of applied to a lot of different animals. So that was a really good one. And I don't want to give away your book too much because there's info that people have to digest themselves and take a look at, what really applies to what they're trying to do. So that was a good chapter. Do you have anything you'd like to kind of just recoup from there or recap from that chapter?
Yeah, it's just it's a matter of making sure that you have an appropriate amount of energy to carry a projectile into the speed that it needs, and the mass, so the momentum is really what you're looking for to get to the point where it can reach the targeted goal in terms of incapacitation or something like that. Different bullet designs are made for different objectives and outcomes, so it's really important to get something that has like I prefer, if I'm carrying something that's going to be for handguns, for hard cast ammunition, non-expanding, so that it doesn't lose its energy but it maintains penetration, and then a flat nose bullet, largely so that the butt end of it, if you think of something pointy like a boat, and it hits something, it's going to splinter off to one side or the other, whereas something with a flat nose is more likely to just kind of impact and not divert its course.
Just crush its way through instead of slice its way through, basically, right?
Exactly. So I want something that'll crush its way through and not let the butt end swing around, so more mass up front. And if you're going into any type of situation where you're dealing with maybe moose or grizzly bears or black bears or polar bears or whatever, probably avoid the soft point or like hollow point ammunition. That stuff is not quite designed for the intended outcome. Great for, if you were thinking of a home defense or a personal defense against humans or something that might attack you, that's a completely different type of ammunition choice and different means of preparation.
And likewise, you would say probably full metal jackets, FMJs, would probably be off the list.
Yeah, and it's essentially for people who aren't familiar that much with bullet construction, there's a thin lead or a large lead projectile encased in a jacket, so like a little thin-walled copper cup. They pour the lead is essentially in this little cup, and the front, if it hits something soft, it is likely to not deform. But if it would hit like a bone or something, which happens frequently in this type of play out, it can smush and divert its course or lose its momentum and not crush through the intended medium that it's going through. So the main problem I have isn't necessarily the construction of the bullet, although it's not advantageous if you have options like hard cast or solid copper or something, but more so that most of your full metal jacket ammunition is target ammo. So it's not designed to have a lot of propellant so that you don't fatigue yourself shooting at a shooting range or something like that. Whereas something that would be capable of getting through the mass you're looking at you're gonna want more propellant, more velocity to increase that momentum outcome. So I would look specifically at that. If that was your only choice, I would look for something.
Oh, are you there?
Target rounds.
Oh, there you go. Okay, sorry. You blinked out just a minute.
Yeah, did I fall out?
Yeah, it's okay. You're good.
Okay. Yep.
So if you could say that last 5 seconds again, I think it blanked out a little bit.
Definitely. Just making sure that you have something that has that momentum factored in. So target ammo, probably not your go-to because it doesn't have enough speed, and you want something with a balance of all of that. Bullet construction, speed, and weight.
Perfect. That's great, and that's all in that chapter. That's chapter 9. In chapter 10, you have a lot of really thoroughly thought out info on holsters, and I thought that was really, really good because when I was in Alaska with some friends of mine who were hunting brown bear, they got 2 brown bears, and my friend packed a 41 mag on his chest, and I was telling it, it's a pistol, And I was telling him, that's not a big enough pistol for a brown bear. Are you kidding me? These bears are huge. And we saw tracks on sandbars from bears that, the tracks are as big as dinner plates. I thought a tractor went over the beach. It was so big. I thought, holy crap, are we hunting dinosaurs? Are we hunting? This thing was huge. And he came up right up to us, right next to us through the alders, and we never saw him, but he was right there. We heard him. We heard him sneaking up to us, and then he disappeared without so much as a twig snap, which is really scary. But he was walking around the bush with a, 41 mag. Probably it looked kind of like a police officer's pistol, from the 70s. It didn't look like anything really fancy. It was a revolver. And I was telling him, I don't know, I think you should get something a little bigger than that. I don't think I'd want to bet my life on that. And sure enough, when we were coming out of one of our baits, we got pounced on by a juvenile bear, a young bear, probably 2 or 3 years old, just trying to keep us moving off of where they wanted to eat. And he had it on his chest, like I said. He pulled it out and popped a couple rounds right over her head and froze her, and then we just walked right by her, and then she went in to eat. So the holster chapter has a lot of good info. Chapter 11. Can you give us a quick synopsis of that?
Yeah, definitely. Talking about that accessibility that I alluded to earlier with Steve Nelson, talking about that 3-second deployment. Once you react and register what the heck is going on, then do you have something that you can quickly grab and get into a functioning state? I like especially fishermen, they really love chest holsters. If you're going through dense, your hands are usually up close by your face or your chest, so that's something that it's easy to access and grab, like a handgun out of a chest holster or bear spray out of a chest holster. And that's actually
I'll be there. Hey, Anthony, are you there? And keep in mind he's in rural Wyoming, so maybe the reception isn't so great. There you go. Now I can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, you blinked out just a little bit. You were talking about your hands are up near your face, so a chest holster might be good. You're going through dense brush, and that kind of skipped out a little bit. Sorry.
Yep. Totally. Bear spray, that or firearm, that's a great place for them. There's a few, pros and cons to weigh as well for that sort of thing. So there's, a lot of options. I'd say the most important thing is just pick something that is going to be there when you need it there. Like I have one of my friends has a chest holster that he'll wear when we go out elk hunting. But especially for archery season, it can be 20, 30 degrees in the morning and then 70, 80 degrees in the afternoon. So the layering that you do, you take your holster off, you take your jacket off, you take whatever, then you put your holster back on. Make sure that there's not a system in place that is going to leave you exposed. So if you take your jacket off when you stop to eat snacks or get water, that you don't leave your holster on the ground or something like that, which is one of the reasons I tend to be a fan of having it kind of in the middle, higher thigh zone so that it's out of the way of the backpack that I would be carrying, but also would allow you to grab it quick. And if you're delayering and relayering, it's not a hindrance that I think, oh gosh, like this thing is so annoying, I don't want to take it off this time, I'm going to leave it at the car, and then you might be out of it when you need it.
Right. No, that's legit. That's totally good. Okay, so chapters 12, 13, and 14. Chapter 12 says some expert opinions, and you let's see here. You had some good sources there that were commenting on the same kind of information. I don't want to give that away though, because that's kind of information that you've gathered that's more personal. Chapter 13, you have some legal considerations, and then chapter 14, you had some author's opinion, and I thought that was probably the most valuable chapter. Now, without divulging too much information so that people don't want to get the book, but what do you want to say on those 3 chapters? Because they are useful info, and they're kind of just as valuable as the other information in a lot of ways, because many of them are experiential.
I fully disclose, I haven't had these intense experiences defensively against, grizzly bears or things like that, that I'm setting the book's basis on. But everything that I've looked at, is based on important stuff that either people from bear country who have had that experience. Like I'm listening and gathering information, research that I've done online, looking at the important aspects of real world events and then trying to pick those apart and see what factors really become important. So the experience, the expert opinions that I have in there, it's important stuff. Definitely Steve Nelson is in there, great source of information. I have Clark Allen, who was a Fish and Game commissioner out here and ended up doing a lot of these court cases where, if there was a questionable grizzly bear defensive shooting or something like that, he would preside over that and look through all the means and kind of judge these things. And he had his fair share. He's a Wyoming guy who's been out hunting and just has some incredible bear stories of, that make your hair stand up and you're like, wow, that's, something that really sticks with you when someone talks about it. And the more time you spend out there, as you get closer and closer, you have these experiences with these incredible animals. You start to realize like there's a thin line between, the chance of walking down a trail and just missing something like you talked about. You could hear it in the alder bushes, but it just passed you, and then it just disappeared. It just snuck away. Like you wouldn't believe, like elk hunting, archery, you do it all the time. You see this 400, 600 pound animal in front of you and crushing through the brush, and then all of a sudden it just disappears and you can't find it for miles. It's like, how did it ghost out of existence?
It's too familiar. Yep.
Yeah.
That's actually, you just kind of rehashed every single elk hunting story experience of my life right there. That's pretty much as successful as I've gotten.
Especially in the archery game. Yeah, that is
Exactly.
that is a common experience there. But yeah, for the legal considerations, I just say, you can't shoot bears for being there, and a lot of people don't want to do that. These are really cool creatures. Yeah. Just a fascinating part of our environment that we'd like to continue on. I think most people. But at the same time, the important parts of protecting people, or I would say mostly people here, is that if you're dealing with some type of aggressive bear or some type of poorly conditioned bear. If you think of Stephen Herrera's book on bear attacks, their causes and avoidance, when he talks about garbage feeding bears and the serious danger that looms with that. If there are trouble bears that aren't getting reported or are doing these behaviors over and over, they're learning that this behavior is successful and that they're going to keep it up. It's only a matter of time before somebody gets hurt or that bear gets hurt. And I think, if you were the one that was in danger of getting hurt, you might want that situation to have been figured out already. You had a really interesting episode on a young boy in Utah. It was a black bear, I think it was. And there's, people had seen this bear and kind of had problems and left, but nobody reported it. Or then there was someone wrote up on the sign that it was there, but people hadn't seen it on their way in. So I think, always make sure that you're definitely aware that what you do can help other people if you are taking your time and really focused on it. For legal considerations, definitely you have to know that there is not just an open tag like, oh, I felt scared so I shot, that's
right.
Not something like your buddy in Alaska with that 41 Magnum on his chest holster, 2 shots over the bear's head, and that was his reaction, and that was the bear got to continue its eating. You guys got to get away safely. That wasn't a situation where this bear was exhibiting behavior that was dangerous. It was just doing its thing. You guys were doing your thing. And fortunately, you guys got to split ways. Yeah.
Best case scenario, right? Nobody got hurt. We just went on our way. It was a good deal. And I was pretty like, wow, that happened fast, So
totally.
Yeah, it was. And that's what happens. I mean, if you're not ready for that amount of adrenaline and excitement and fast thinking, and I think your book, that's the thing. That's why I wanted to talk with you about your book. It's a great, comprehensive, preparatory kind of manual on everything from the mental game to the skill development game to comparing the products you're going to choose to defend yourself to the accessories that go with the products, the holsters and the ammo, and it's a really great book. And we're going to put the Amazon link down below. How much is it for sale for on Amazon, Anthony? I didn't even look at the price. I'm sorry.
No worries, not at all. I think I currently have it on there for about $20, but I'm going to throw it up yeah, it's something I want to spread around, and also recuperate some of the effort that I put into making it. So I don't expect it to be a bestseller because it's a very niche category. But for anyone listening that catches this news, it'll be on there, and I'm going to throw it on for $12.99. And
oh man, are you kidding me? You're giving it away.
People can hopefully grab that.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it fits right in your backpack. It's very easy to carry, lightweight, small, paperback. Goes in your backpack, briefcase, glove compartment, anything like that. So I recommend you guys check it out. Anthony Molina is the author. He's right over here in Jackson Hole, just about 6 hours from Boise or so. And I'm in Boise, by the way, Anthony. But it's called Handgun Selection for Grizzly Bear Defense, a conclusive guide to choosing your defensive handgun for the outdoors.
Yep.
This is great, man. I appreciate you coming on and chatting with us about this. This is a phenomenal idea.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really glad that I reached out to you. I've been a huge fan of the channel. Awesome. I think, it's awesome to find information about what you're looking for, and I think that's one of the amazing things your channel does.
Thanks,
that was really important for me, trying to gather all my data when I first went on this journey of making sure I could stay safe out in bear country while enjoying it.
No doubt.
So I wanted to get that.
And enjoying it safely. That's the key, right? Even if the bear has to have a terribly inflamed nose and eyes, or if it gets has to be shot, at least the person can come back, and the rest of the scenario goes on for them. So I think it's a great book, man, and a good effort and a good goal, to help educate people. So.
Awesome.
Well, thanks a lot, Anthony. I appreciate it. And again, the link's down at the bottom of the video. And I'm going to touch base with Anthony here in a few weeks and see if we can talk about some other things as well. So thanks a lot, Anthony. You have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Excellent. Thanks, Atticus. You do the same.
You bet. Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Hey, how do I not lose this recording?
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We've slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.